Hello, everyone. Welcome to Banned Books, Building Skills for Civic Education and Civil Debate.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad you joined us today. My name is Jennifer Ehalt. I'm a senior manager at Common Sense Education, and with me today is Sue Thoughts.
Hey, everyone. So happy to be here this morning. Well, it's morning here in in Los Angeles. I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm a senior program manager supporting schools and districts across the state of California and beyond.
Great. And I think we're in for a really good discussion today around this hot topic happening right now. And so we're going to get started here. We have really just a nice conversation around where we want to share some strategies, tips, and advice on how to navigate these hard topics in your classroom. So we'll go ahead and get started.
So, the issue that we have on our agenda is about banned books. And in the US, the battle over banned books has been heating up for a few months. And we have been asked a few times to have a conversation about this because at Common Sense, not only do we provide education around digital citizenship, but we also do a whole readings at the Common Sense media site where we review books and movies and television shows and games and so on. And so a lot of politicians and parents have been demanding the removal of certain books from libraries and from school curriculum. And many of the books are under fire. A lot of them are newer titles, right, purchased by school librarians in recent years as part of an effort to diversify the libraries and the offerings that are being made to our students. And so I recently had a conversation with a couple of librarians the other night on Twitter Spaces. And I just want to tell you, and Jennifer listened to it, she listened in, and it was very insightful to see what their approach has been to having these conversations in their schools. So there's the link to the recording if you're interested in listening in and hearing directly from our two librarians. They're Mia Gitlin and Brandy Veal. And Mia and Brandy really had some great, interesting things to say about their approach to books being challenged or to talking about banned books in their school. So, yeah, Jennifer, you heard Brandy begin our conversation by talking about the importance of her two takeaways that I grabbed right away were the importance of having model policy in place so that, whenever a book challenge does arise in your school setting, how can you respond in a way that, where you already have a protocol, right? Being proactive and setting that model policy for what happens when a book is challenged in your school. So she provided model policy that comes from the ALA. So we'll put a link in there to, hers was from the CSLA. So hers was from the California State Librarians Association. And she brought in some model policy around intellectual freedom resources. So I thought that was really a great tip, not just for librarians, but for schools who are possibly either in the middle of challenges. Hopefully you are ahead of it, right? And you're being proactive and you put policy in place before challenges come. The other piece that I thought was really interesting, did you hear her say, read the book, right? When a challenge comes up, when a book is challenged, understand what the issue is. You cannot judge a book just based on a simple passage or a few words or a scene, right? You have to understand the larger context. And so I thought those two pieces from Randy were really helpful. And the thing that Mia did that I have featured here on the slide was Mia did tons of stuff, but one tiny piece that I wanted to share with you all was during Banned Books Week, she held a Banned Books banquet. And I'm not going to give away the whole entire thing, but it just sounded like sounded very intriguing, right? Like putting the books, she held a book tasting where she put the banned books in the books that have been historically banned into brown paper bags and laid them out on the table. And she had the kids understand what is book banning, what is the history of it. And then they could open up their banned books and predict why the books might have been banned. And then they were asked to do some research to confirm or change their ideas about it, and then create a digital poster about why a person might want to read that book, or what is it about that book. So I thought all the resources that she gave were coming from the ALA, the American Libraries Association, and they have a whole set of resources around banned books and Banned Books Week, which took place, I believe, in September of last year. So probably again this year. But Jennifer, I don't know if everybody has a teacher librarian in their school.
And they don't. And the other thing I think I remember her saying is I really like the idea of these teachable moments where students were creating Twitter campaigns, to kind of build out their voice and their civic engagement around this, as well as I think public service announcements was another creative way, especially with all the digital tools we have access to now. Students love to create, and if they have a message or something they really truly believe in, or never really knew how to really believe in something, this is like that first step to getting them to take a stand, on something that they truly think is important. So a lot of really great just tips and good listen. So highly recommend.
We asked Mia to come to our EdWeb, which will be in May. And so she will be coming and talking all about the results of some of that activism and the campaigns that she's asked her students to create. And also, share some in more detail, some of this information that came out of Banned Books Week, and some of her protocols, her templates, and all that good stuff. So look out for that on the Common Sense EdWeb community. So let's move on. What if you're not a teacher librarian? What if you're not steeped in banned books and you don't even know where to start? Or I can't even think about touching this with my 10-foot pole in my classroom or in my school, right?
You're not alone. You're not alone.
Where can we start?
Yeah.
So with these, a lot of teachers say that it's hard to discuss these events in their classroom, but what we can focus on, instead of just focusing on this topic of banned books, is really focusing on skills. Skills are a great place to start. And the 3 skills that we want to focus on today, instead of just focusing on the politics around banned books and some of the heated conflict about book challenges, is really focusing on things like civic engagement, giving your kids a foundation and an understanding of how to take a stand for something that they believe in, which serves them in all kinds of purposes, not just this one here, right? This is all kinds of context. The other piece is around civil discourse. How do I engage in dialogue with somebody that I disagree with, that I fundamentally, have a different opinion about, something than my neighbor or than a person online, right? How do you engage in a civil dialogue? And then the last piece here is around media literacy. So these are the 3 skills we're just going to kind of touch on today and give you some examples and demonstrate lessons about these 3 skills, and specifically, around how to get started in the classroom. So Jennifer, it's really important that when you have a hot topic like this, or when people have feelings that could potentially be hurt or create a hurtful situation, especially when you're talking about things that are, that can trigger discomfort. It doesn't mean that you shy away from these conversations, but you acknowledge that you need a set of norms that will at least try to mitigate some of these possible hurt feelings, and some of that, some of these conflicts that are in the classroom. So these come from, I believe that this list comes from Facing History in Ourselves, but there's a couple of other places, like Cult of Pedagogy has a great place about establishing norms. Of course, Glenn Singleton has great norms around conversations around race and so on. So lots of people have, but I just wanted to give an example here of things like making comments using I statements, or if someone says something that hurts or offends, don't attack that person, attack that comment, right? Not the person that hurt your feelings, and explain why that that comment was hurtful toward you. Right. So, but these are just some examples of ways that you can establish norms in your classroom to have those tricky conversations. Is there anything that you want to add
Yeah,
on?
I mean, I just think it's important because we as educators, we all know we don't necessarily have to have all the answers, and we're not going to have all the right answers, and they can be very, gray, and we can grapple with all of this. So spending time establishing norms can create that space in your classroom where everyone feels welcome and can share a perspective in a safe way. So you are the facilitator, and this is part of that list of things to do when preparing for difficult conversations in your classroom.
And again, the word here is proactive, right?
Yes.
Do it up front.
Yeah.
So with the next slide here, we have our first of those three, right? Centered around civic engagement. And this is a thinking routine that comes from our digital dilemma hub, where so you'll see here on the screen that there is the link to the Common Sense Digital Dilemmas, and one of them is called Take a Stand. And this thinking routine, this activity, really centers on exploring different perspectives in the classroom, on digital dilemmas that really come from community and civic life. So this banned books topic is a great example of something that you could write. You could write your own, but we will give you the routine here, giving one that we have as an example that comes from a protest, right? So on this next slide here, Jennifer, do you want to talk about the protest?
Absolutely. Here's an example of, a dilemma that really can happen out there. So at a protest, people were chanting and rallying to express hate for another group of people. Someone later gathered pictures from the protest and really started sharing them on social media, asking people for help identifying the protesters. And so once protesters were identified, people started to publicly shame them for, their hateful views and pressured their employees to fire them. So, the question is, do you agree with the practice of calling out the protesters' identities online? And why or why not?
Yeah.
There
Notice that we did not say what they're protesting. We're just talking about a practice of calling out protesters online, right? And their identities. And so what we ask, we pull out this activity. So on the next slide, you'll see that we have a Mentimeter. We use a tool called Mentimeter if we're doing this in a virtual way. And we have kids vote on whether they strongly disagree, strongly agree, or are somewhere in the middle. Right. So you can do this using a virtual tool. But if I'm in a real live classroom with real live face-to-face kids or real live face-to-face people, I have them, walk across the classroom and like I say, this wall is strongly agree. This wall is strongly disagree. Place yourselves accordingly. Right. And so we've done this activity many times. Yeah, go ahead.
And I got to say, the Mentimeter, I think we talked about this, Sue, when we were planning this session, that we agreed that something in a digital way where students have to think on their own, where they're not pooled in a way. I feel like in real life, they're going to see where their friends go in the room. But in a digital tool, they have to have that first natural instinct of like, do you agree or disagree? And when they make that mark, they can certainly take it back later, but they can't take it back on the next screen that we're going to show here. Like once you made your answer, like that's where you are stuck for the moment.
And that one, stuck for the moment, right? Like, what was your initial reaction, right?
Yeah.
And we want to see, in this one, you'll see, on Menti, you can see where people landed on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the spectrum. And so we really like, I like this tool. I mean, just to use it for quick and easy demo kind of pieces. But it's really helpful to kind of get that, as opposed to in a chat where you say, do you agree? And if the first person says agree, everybody agrees all the way down. So yeah. So the next part on the next slide, we have this piece here where we ask folks to share the rationale for why they agreed or disagreed. And you could do that, using a digital tool. But in a classroom, you can have them turn and talk and share with each other. The purpose of this is to try to hear from students who have different perspectives, right? So once you talk to one of your neighbors or when you talk to somebody who's from across the room, they share their views, and you as a teacher, if you share them out loud as a group, you can document some of these themes, right? And start to kind of like write them down. And you as a teacher can facilitate this conversation and try to pull in as many points of view as possible, right?
Yep.
That's the idea. And so on the next slide, you'll see, I do this using a mentee and, pulling in some of these reasons, and you encourage your students, once they hear from other people around the room, they might say, ah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought
Mhm.
about that. They won't say that out loud, but,
No, they
but,
won't.
but it might get them to consider other points of view that maybe they hadn't thought about yet. Right. And as students listen to their classmates' perspectives, their own opinions might change. Like, oh, I hadn't thought that maybe this situation might impact somebody beyond that individual, right, who was in that protest. And if you get them fired, then you impact their family or whatever, right? So you might bring about some other ideas and perspectives that might change a student's mind. So if they have that shift, encourage them to think about moving their place right along that
Mhm.
line. So that is an activity, and on this last piece on the next slide, we have them look back at these responses and share what's something that they had not originally considered. Right. So this is a great way to just kind of pull apart. Again, these are not black and white issues that you present as the digital dilemma. It's a dilemma because it is complex. It is a dilemma because there is no right answer. And so, with a lot of these book challenges or with a lot of these things, they are also complex and difficult sometimes.
Mhm.
Jennifer, should we move on?
Yeah, I mean, that was really the heart of it all. We really wanted to just walk you through what these, routines can look like. And again, any teachable moment throughout your days and weeks, put that dilemma up there and ask these 3 or 4 questions. So it
Yeah.
can be really done. It can be, you can go 20 minutes into this, or you can just kind of address it and kind of address it on the spot and move on, in such
Yep.
a way that's like comfortable for everybody. So we just wanted to showcase a few other lessons related to these conversations. And so this one happens to be around civil discourse, learning to engage in dialogue. This comes from our high school curriculum. We are civil communicators. Um, and so this really has a great learning a lesson around
Absolutely.
how you
Absolutely.
communicate with others, especially in social spaces.
Yeah. And so on the next slide, you'll see one of the definitions that comes up in here and what civil discourse is.
Mhm.
It's a conversation that involves respectful sharing and debate of ideas, just like you practiced in that dilemma that you had back
Mhm.
there, right? Like, but maybe this is the foundation of where we begin. Maybe you teach this lesson before you have that kind of dialogue in class. And on the next slide, you will see an example, an activity that comes from the lesson where you're watching a video of a student activist, Cameron Kasky, and he is talking about the ways in which he regrets his interactions with somebody else because he didn't just debate the issue, but he went after somebody in a very personal way and with the intention of embarrassing and hurting someone, and how much he regrets that. Right, like
Mhm.
he wanted to make a point, he wanted to stick to the issue, and that's where he should have just zipped his lip
Mhm.
and said, all right, like I made my point, right? I don't need to personally attack somebody in this way. And
Right.
Jennifer's favorite part is he actually gets to meet people who he
It
who
is
he's
my favorite. It
opposed to.
just makes it real for students, which I think they need sometimes to get out, in real life and see that there are people behind these walls, these faces online. So it's a really
Yeah,
great lesson. It's very well received whenever we showcase this in a professional development or amongst,
yep,
educators and students. So worth taking
yep.
a look at.
So, and then, so that's that
And then
lesson. The next
yeah.
lesson we wanted to focus on was one that I thought was important here.
Mhm.
And it's about confirmation bias. And maybe, confirmation bias is not exactly what you think of when you think of banned books here, but it is something that, if you look at the next slide, it'll give you a definition of what that is. And it's a tendency to interpret information in a way that affirms what we already believe. Right. And so when
Mhm.
it comes to, some of these books, we probably already have an opinion about them. Right.
Mm.
And any information that we receive is, or any information that we seek out can have a tendency to affirm our position. And so we need students to be aware of their own biases when searching for information, when interpreting information, when understanding it. And so we need them to understand why it's important to recognize that bias and move past it. So and so cognitive bias is on the next slide, and it really explains to them how, we have these limitations in our thinking, and it's, caused by perceiving information through our personal experiences and preferences. And this lesson really focuses on the emotional sensors in our brain that go off whenever we hear things that we're opposed to, or whenever we hear things that we like. It's not about reason and logic all the time. It is about that emotion that gets flared up when we hear something that something that conforms to our identity and the way that we like to think of ourselves, right? So this is a great lesson that explores that. And on the next slide, you'll see that it does it through a great video from KQED that is entitled, "What Would It Take to Change Your Mind About Something You Really Believed?" And really explores that issue.
Yep.
So the next slide actually has a quick piece about like having your students explore some resources about how we can challenge confirmation bias. So that lesson is just fabulous. Great deep dive into understanding how our brains are wired, a little neurobiology, a little bit of media literacy, and all that good stuff. Right?
All the stuff covered in 20 minutes, right? One chunk of 20 minutes. So yeah, those lessons are all really good entry points into these conversations. And so definitely check them out. We can maybe start to wrap up here. We don't want to keep anyone too long. We know time is precious. So
Yep. So this last piece,
yeah.
we just wanted to say we want to mitigate these potentially polarizing ideas by developing skills and dispositions that help our students slow down, be reflective, seek, good facts and evidence, consider other people's perspectives, envision those options, and then take action for the things that they believe in. That's what we're trying to teach our students to do when it comes to any controversial debate. That is what we're all about.
Absolutely. So thank you again for joining us. This session, has been recorded and will be, placed on our Common Sense Education YouTube playlist channel. So we invite you to go over there in case you missed it, share with colleagues, and then we'll also include all of the links and resources that we shared along with the slide deck underneath that video. So we will be running these, throughout the months in the coming months. And so we hope that you'll kind of subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us and learn more about all of these hot topics.
Join us again.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.